Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and today we're going to take a look at a little bit of Smith-Morra. Well, not theory so much, in passing, but I'm not going to give anything that even pretends to be a comprehensive look at the gambit. But we'll look at one main game and a couple of speed games that I played years ago as a little appetizer to the main action. So the Smith-Morra gambit begins with these moves, so e4, c5, d4. This is the gambit, at least it is once white plays c3. And we're going to look at the accepted with d takes c3. Now, black can also decline it in two ways that I think are good, one way that's not quite so good. So knight f6 is perfectly acceptable, and this will invariably transpose into what we get from a c3 Sicilian. So c3, knight f6, e5, knight to d5, d4, c takes d4, and so on. Against the c3 Sicilian, black can also play d5. However, via the Smith-Morra gambit move order, d5 is not quite as good because after e takes d5, queen takes d5, c takes d4, white gets knight to c3, gets it in much more quickly than he would in the Alapin or Sveshnikov or 2c3 Sicilian move order. So here it takes white longer. So ed, queen d5, d4, and now black generally plays knight f6. It's not the only move, but what black does not do here is play c takes d4. So that would transpose into that questionable line. The only decent way for black to play, if he plays cd, is in response to cd to immediately play e5. And that line, I think white gets an advantage there too, but it's manageable for black. But otherwise, without e5, I think white gets a pretty nice, pretty pleasant advantage in that position. So d5 against the Smith-Morra I wouldn't really recommend. One possibility that's not really present via the c3 Sicilian move order is the move d3. And then black will play d6, g6, bishop g7, knight c6, and so on. And I think maybe white's a touch better there, but nothing too serious, and it's a very playable option for black, and one that avoids a lot of the sharp stuff. So white will play for a quick c4. In fact, white often just plays c4 straight away here, and then you get kind of a Maroczy bind setup. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to give that little bit of background information, but that's all I want to say about it. So let's jump into the accepted Smith-Morra gambit and proceed from here. Now, black has quite a range of possibilities here. Knight c6 is the main move, but you can play d6, you can play e6, you can play a6. The same kinds of things, and a lot of these will let's say, transpose into each other. So here, for instance, I want to show you a quick game with a6. This is a blitz game of mine from, 1997, a long time ago. And it's a pretty interesting little game. So knight f3, e6, bishop c4, b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, castles. Okay, so I had white. I'm just developing speedily along here, while black is trying not to commit, it's not committing to his kingside setup yet. We'll see why, to some extent, a bit later. So instead he's playing very aggressively, really, on the queen side. Trying to grab a bunch of space over there. And in a way it's understandable, because in the main line, the classic main line of the Smith-Morra gambit, black is a bit passive. He maintains his extra pawn. He's not in any immediate danger, but white has a very comfortable position with no real risk, except for, of course, being a pawn down, which is not trivial. But white gets to kind of play very easily, very leisurely, without any real any danger of being in danger for quite some time. Well, here black is playing in a way that forces white to do things, and here my opponent played b4. So this is against a friend of mine who's or at least was at the time, about a 2100 player. Well, I could play knight a4, but that would really not be in the spirit of the thing. I didn't play this Smith-Morra gambit to stick my knight on the rim and go 2 pawns down. I want to be a piece down, so I played knight to d5. Typical Sicilian move. So this, of course, opens the e file, and black has to be pretty careful here. Now, I think the best move at this stage is bishop to d6, although here too black has some dangers. Rook e1 check, Okay, and here I think king f8 is absolutely forced. When after queen to d4, black is an entire piece up, but white has very good compensation. So if instead knight to e7, which looks eminently reasonable, developing a piece, preparing a castle, and so on, well, white plays knight to g5, aiming to play queen h5 and create some serious threats. And if h6, we'll see another nice idea, bishop to f4, with the point that after bishop takes f4, there's d6, maybe there's even knight takes f7, and all kinds of heck is breaking loose on the board. So after d6, then there's rook e7, rook f7, and black is in a lot of trouble here. So, as I said though, king f8, and this position is unclear and certainly playable for black. So I think bishop d6 is right. My opponent played d6. And now here, knight to d4 is certainly very playable. Might even be better than what I did. For instance, bishop to e7, bishop a4 check, knight to d7. Maybe king f8 is better than this. But knight to d7, rook e1, bishop d5, knight f5. And, alright, black is in a lot of danger here. So I'm threatening the bishop on d5, I'm threatening knight takes d6, threatening knight takes g7, and this is a disaster. So, but with king f8, it's not nearly so clear. So I played something different, and so you know it's not knight to d4. So have a look, see if you can figure out what white's move should do. So I spent some time in the game. I think I spent a minute and a half, 2 minutes when the game took place, trying to come up with some way of really pushing my attack forward. I mean, you know, I don't want him to castle. I mean, if black can just play bishop e7, knight f6, and castles, he's going to be fine. So certainly I'll have some play. I mean, I could, you know, maybe win the b pawn in some variation, maybe bishop to a4 check. I mean, there's a lot of promising looking moves here. Certainly white enjoys a very pleasant position, certainly practically speaking. But how to extract the maximum here? Well, what I came up with was this. I played queen to d4. So the idea is, of course, he can't play bishop to e7 yet. He's got to play knight f6. And now bishop to h6. So this is a pretty neat idea. Black, I think, has to play bishop to e7, and maybe with this he can survive. For instance, bishop takes g7, rook g8, check here, takes, and while white has enough material or enough compensation for the piece, I don't think he has more. At least it's not clear that he has more. Other options are knight to h4, and on castles, bishop takes g7. I'm not sure what's going on here. This looks pretty promising to me. And it might even be possible to play queen takes b4 and go for something like this. So knight to c6 is threatened, knight f5 may be threatened, and you know, black has some problems here still to solve. Although I don't know that could say that white is better, certainly not, but it's interesting. Anyway, bishop to e7 I think is forced. If he plays rook to g8, then white wins roughly like this. Bishop to a4 check, rook to f to e1 check, and now bishop f4. What does black do about the threat of bishop takes d6? If he plays king f8, what now? If you said rook takes e7, you're completely right. So if king takes, just rook e1 check, and for that matter, on queen takes, rook e1 anyway, because if the queen goes to d8, bishop takes d6 check, wins everything, and I'm sure forces mate very quickly. So queen to b8 instead. Well, but here there are a few ways to win. Knight to g5 seems to be the most precise. Rook h8, queen b4, takes, and black is lost here. All right, finally there's the choice in the game, which shows my idea. G takes h6, rook f to e1 check. Now if he plays king to d7, I can either play rook a to c1, preparing bishop to a4 check, which might be the best move of all, or I could just give a bunch of checks and then take the knight, and black is completely lost. The most effective finishing move here is what? See if you can figure it out. Rook e3, with the threat of rook takes a6 check, king takes a6, and rook a3 check followed by rook takes a5 mate. And there's no defense to this idea that doesn't allow a different mate even more quickly or as quickly. Alright, so in the game, after rook ft1 check, my opponent played bishop to e7. I took rook to g8, and now this. And while material is still approximately even, black has 2 rooks for a queen, the position isn't at all. Bishop to a4 check is a lethal threat. And he's got pawns dropping all over the place, his pieces are undeveloped, and I won a few moves later. So the game went like this. Rook g6, check, knight d7, I took, and I took this and he resigned. Alright, so that was our first little detour here. So okay, our main game continued with knight to c6, knight f3, e6. Now, just to mention quickly, the main line goes like this. Of course, you can get there through an e6 move order as well. And so this is the main position. Okay, black sometimes plays queen to c7 here, and then white plays most of the time bishop to f4. But the main move here is e5, just cutting out white's e5 possibility altogether, and intending to play bishop to g4. White normally plays h3, although bishop to e3 has been tried before, hoping to economize on a tempo. In fact, there's a game that I played that made it into a book on the Smith-Morra, unfortunately. I think it's my only loss in that opening when I played it regularly as a kid. I think I had something like a 13-1-1 or 13-1-2 score with the opening. Naturally, the only game I lost made it into the database. It was, of course, was also against the strongest player that I used it against, which was Igor Ivanov in the mid-'80s, I think maybe in 84 or 85, and lost that game. But yeah, it was also the only time I played h3. Anyway, the only time I didn't play h3 in this position. So h3 castles, and white has enough compensation for the pawn. I mean, he's got easy development. There's the hole on d5, but black is okay too. I mean, black is not in any immediate danger, and so I would just say that white has about enough compensation for the pawn, but not more than that. Anyway, it's not the only line by any means. It's just what I would call the main line. Alright, so Van Wely played e6, bishop to c4, and here Van Wely played a6. There's also an interesting little trappy line, it's called the Siberian trap, where black plays queen to c7. Now, I'm not sure it's a fantastic line. I think white should play queen to e2 against this. And now if black plays knight f6, playing still as if the trap was going to go through, well, here white plays e5 with some advantage, I think. Better is to play d6, and then this is likely to transpose into the main line, at least the queen c7 rather than the e5 version of it. So white will castle, probably play bishop to f4 to induce e5, then bishop g5, and so on. Okay, so instead, though, the trap, which I was about to fall for, I fell for the first bit of it, starts with white castling at this point. So this is a blitz game I played, I think back in '99 against Patrick Hummel. And it continued queen to e2, knight to g4, and here I remembered, oh yeah, that's right, the Siberian trap. So, I hadn't played the Smith-Morra in a long time. This was just a blitz game. And so I realized, okay, yeah, I remember now. Black threatens to play knight to d4, and of course knight takes d4 is impossible because of queen takes h2 mate. But if you don't play knight takes d4 and move the queen, then black plays knight takes f3 check and queen takes h2 mate. So, what do you do here? Okay, obviously h3 is a horrible move because of knight to d4. You just walked right into it. Rook to d1 is not so great. It stops knight to d4, but after bishop to c5, now you've got to worry about f2. Maybe the best move is knight to b5, and after queen to b8, then h3, because knight to d4 is no longer available thanks to that second knight, the knight on b5 covering that square. So black should probably just retreat, and then takes, bishop to b3, and here white retreats the knight to either c3 or to d4, and in both cases white has roughly, well, I don't know if he has full compensation, but still a fair amount of compensation for the pawn. So it's certainly still a game, and any result can still happen. Well, white shows something else. Again, it's a blitz game. I like playing a knight on d5. Why not do it again? All right, so first of all, if queen to b8, white should maybe play rook to d1 and keep the sack intact. In the game, my opponent played e takes d5. I recaptured, knight to e7, and here actually the best move is d6. So I had a similar idea. I kind of wanted to keep that threat under wraps, though. So I wanted to kind of keep it ready, but I should have done it straight away. So I played bishop to g5. He played f6. I played bishop to h4. He played d6. And it seemed to me that black has so many light squared weaknesses that, and not very much development, that, okay, maybe it's not worth a full piece, but certainly white should have reasonable practical chances here, at least in blitz. So I continued rook a to c1, bishop to d7, knight to d4, and here he went astray. He should have played queen to b6, and then it's not clear that white really has enough for the piece at all. Instead, he played queen to d8, which keeps a further eye on the knight on e7, but this going backwards idea is a bit dangerous. Probably the best move here is bishop to b5. This is, I think, the most accurate. But I played knight to e6. He took, I recaptured. He played knight to e5. And now we have kind of a nice 19th century finish to the game. So I checked, and here he should have played knight from 7 to c6. After f4 and then knight to g6, the position is very unclear. So now white's compensation is very, very genuine here. But again, it's not clear if I have more than enough compensation for the piece. But after knight 5 to c6, now life is good. I played bishop takes f6, and he went astray by taking, and now rook takes c6. So a very nice way to finish the game. And he resigned here because after b takes c6, I take this guy, I check, and I give mate. I'm down a rook in 2 pieces, but checkmate beats everything. So that was the second little snack on the way to looking at the full game here, the Esserman-van Wely game. All right, so Van Wely did not play queen to c7. It wasn't the Siberian trap, but he played a6. And this could transpose to that first blitz game that I showed you after castles. If Van Wely had played b5 here, it would transpose to that first game. But instead he played knight g to e7. And this is a very interesting line, especially, I would say, at a club level. And the reason is that if you try to play this like the main line Smith-Morra, if you play queen e2 and rook to d1, it really just dead ends. So queen e2, knight g6, rook d1, bishop to e7. And it's hard to see what exactly white does to cultivate an initiative here. I mean, if you play knight to d5, I think black could probably just castle and ignore it. Maybe you could take it as well and then castle, but that's probably pretty decent too. But certainly just ignoring it altogether by castling should be fine. So here it's again not really clear what white is up to. So the best move here is bishop to g5. And this prevents knight to g6 for the moment, obviously. And black can, of course, do something about it, but whatever he does is going to involve a little bit of a concession. He could play h6, and white plays bishop to h4, and there's a plus and a minus to that. So on h6, white can actually play both bishop to e3 and bishop to h4. So these are both entirely playable. Let's just briefly discuss bishop to h4. Well, here, if black really wants to break that pin, he's going to have to play g5, which is obviously very, very weakening. So if black wants to break the pin, he can do it straight away, and this is what happened in the game. Van Wely played f6. But the drawback of this move is that now the bishop on c4 becomes much stronger than it would have been with the pawn back on f7. So this a6, e6 with no d6 planned by black really is geared towards killing that bishop. Remember, let me just set that position back up from the absolute main line as soon as I can find it. Yeah, the traditional main line. Here you can see that the white bishop on c4 is a very good piece. In fact, black will often play bishop to e6 to swap it off. And that involves some concessions as well. Still, the d5 is also a problem there. So anyway, here in the main line, it's a very good bishop, and white's control over the light squares is really excellent. With this plan like this, okay, clearly the bishop on c4 has nothing to do. The knight can't jump into b5, can't jump into d5, or at least not clearly. So that's black's aim. So by playing bishop to g5, it's an attempt to kind of soften black up. If black wants to neutralize this dark squared bishop, well, he's going to have to play something like f6, but now the bishop on c4, we'll see, gets a future again. So Esserman plays bishop back to e3. And okay, here Van Wely played knight to g6. b5 is the alternative after bishop to b3. One interesting idea that's been played, the main move here is knight to g6. And then white plays knight to d4 with the idea of f4, f5. But Palliser, and it's been played before, Palliser suggests maybe the move knight to a5, and it's actually scored quite well. Here, I think in all three games, at least that are in the PowerBook database, white played bishop to c2, which is really much too compliant. It's just more, it's almost like giving up. Not quite, but it's rolling over and letting black have what he wants. So white can do a couple of other things. One thing is that he can regain the pawn with this sham sacrifice. But as Palliser notes, I think correctly, black is definitely not in any trouble and might, in the long term, have some small chances thanks to his bishop pair. So at this point, black is definitely not better, but you know, if anyone in the long run is going to win this, it's likelier that it'll be black thanks to the bishops. So Palliser and the engines, chess engines, suggest knight to d4 instead. And this is another very just standard traditional move, clearing the way for the f-pawn to advance. So this, I think, gives white pretty decent compensation for the pawn. Anyway, this would be safer for black probably than what Van Wely played. So he played knight to g6, now bishop to b3, in advance or in anticipation of b5, which is what Van Wely played. If bishop to e7, white could play knight to d5, and this is in fact pretty decent. ed, knight a5, d6, and this looks pretty good, both objectively and as a practical choice. So clearly as a practical choice, this is very unpleasant for black, but it's objectively good too. It's not a bluff. But if you don't want to sacrifice a piece, you could play knight to a4. Although I should say that if you don't want to sacrifice a piece, you probably shouldn't play the Smith-Morra gambit, because there are going to be a lot of lines where you're forced to sacrifice on top of the initial pawn investment on move 3. Alright, so instead of this, Van Wely played b5. So that stops knight to a4, but it clearly doesn't stop knight to d5. So here we go. Third time, three games, 3 knight to d5 sacrifices. It's white's favorite move in the Sicilian, and certainly in the Smith-Morra. It comes up quite regularly in lines where black has played this, let's say, the non-main line, played lines with e6 and a6 and b5, but not really getting the d-pawn going and developing quickly. Alright, well, what should black do now? Probably the best move. Well, actually, I'll let you think about it. So this is, I think, another good exercise. Should black grab the piece or play rook to b8? The idea there being that white threatens bishop to b6, trapping the queen. Or maybe bishop to b7 or some other move. What do you think? Well, without getting into great detail here, it looks like the best move is rook to b8. And then, okay, white has a number of reasonable options. The computer likes knight to f4, but I think it likes knight f4 just because it doesn't want to sacrifice a piece. But once you enter rook to c1, it kind of likes this move too. And now the best move seems to be a5 for black. And this has occurred in a number of correspondence games. I think one by actual mail and a couple by email. And all 3 games were drawn. Pretty decent players in terms of their correspondence ratings, around 2,400 or so. In one of the games, white played knight to f4. In 2 of them, a3 was played. But like I said, it's roughly equal in every case. Black should not take the knight here. That would be a mistake. Although after a5, a3, perhaps he can. So there are some little finesses that make the difference there. So that would be the place to investigate this further, as well as on move 9, instead of knight to g6, playing b5 and then knight a5. So this is another place that black should investigate if you want to play this line with black. Alright, so b5, knight to d5, and Van Wely took on d5. And this doesn't lose, but it's extremely dangerous. And he went down pretty quickly and powerfully. So e takes d5, of course, opening the e file and hitting the knight. Knight c to e5. d6, shutting in the bishop, and clearing the beautiful a2 g8 diagonal for the white bishop on b3. Bishop to b7. Knight takes. Pawn takes. f4. And in fact, this has happened in some earlier games too. So there were at least 2 or 3 earlier games that reached this position. So once again, you're given a task here, black to move. How do you survive? And let me help you here by flipping the board around so you can look at the game from black's perspective as you try to figure out how to defend. So good luck, take your time, see what you can find. It seems that the best move here is e takes f4. It looks risky. You're opening up the e file, and the f file for that matter, if white wants to take that. But it's the best move. And it looks like white's best rejoinder is rook to e1. After fe3, rook e3 check, black is up 2 full pieces, but of course he has to give one back immediately with bishop to e7. And now, in, as I said, at least 2 games, we had this position and white played queen to d4. Okay, once again, black to move. What do you do? Alright, in one game, black played queen to b8. In another game, he played queen to c8. One of the games black drew, and it seems that a draw is the right result. The other game black lost. So can you figure out which move is the right move? If you said queen to b8, let's have a look. D takes e7, queen to a7. So this looks pretty clever. Trying to keep white's forces all pent up by having them all pinned up. Unfortunately, bishop f7 check is a crusher. King takes f7, only legal move. e8 queen, rook takes, and now rook f1 check. And the problem is that after king g8, rook takes e8 check, rook takes e8, queen takes a7, and white enjoys winning a decisive material advantage. In fact, even better than that is if king to g8, you should take the queen first, because if rook takes, then rook takes e8 check and it's mate next move. So this occurred in a game Zakharov against Gusev. Actually, I think this was an over-the-board game played in Tula in 2001, and white did go on to win. So the right move here is queen to c8. And now, after, for instance, rook a to e1, queen c6, rook f3. Black is threatening mate on g2. That's kind of important, that little detail. So rook f3, king d8, takes, knight takes, rook e7. And this lets white win back all of his goodies. But now black's king has run off to safety, material is even, and the position is even too. Probably white's best is to play queen e5 check. Black should probably block with the queen. You swap queens, and the ending is maybe 1 millimeter better for white. But in a correspondence game or between very strong players, white has basically no winning chances here. So in fact, the players agreed to a draw at this point. This was Castillo against Stepanov, ICCF email game in 2007. Alright, so this seems to be best play, and so it shows that after knight to d5, black can survive with e takes d5. Rook to b8 is it's definitely a more solid approach, but e takes d5 objectively seems to be okay. Alright, back to the game though. After f4, flipping the board back around, Van Wely did not play e takes f4, but played queen f6. It's a novelty, but it clearly wasn't something that he prepared at home. It's just figuring out what in the world to do with this terrifying line over the board. Alright, Esserman played f takes e5, Van Wely played queen takes e5, and now white has at least 2 very, very powerful ways to continue here. You might want to try to find them. Well, the easy one is just to go for the checks. Bishop f7 check, bishop to b6 check, and now rook to e1, with the point being that when the queen runs out of the way, rook to e8 is mate, or mate next move, depending on where the queen's gone. So this wins. But Esserman found a way that's just about as good and definitely more beautiful. He played bishop to g5. Now you might have a difficult time at first glance figuring out what the point of this is. I mean, it's very, very sneaky, very subtle. Here's the point. If you haven't found it yourself and don't want to try, here it is. Queen takes g5, and now queen to e1 check. Okay, what's the point? Well, on king to d8, queen to a5 check. And now it's mate next move. If king to c8, queen c7, okay, that's pretty banal stuff. But king to e8, bishop f7 is really quite attractive and unusual. So all four white pieces in the action. I mean, only the rook on a1 and the pawns on their home squares aren't playing a role here. So the rook on f1 needs to protect the bishop needs to give the mate, the queen has to cover d8, and the pawn on d6 takes away the e7 square. Very nice. What are the options? Well, if knight to e5, then bishop to f7 check drives the king to d8 anyway. That will win quickly. And if bishop to e7, then bishop to f7 check. Okay, again, king d8, queen a5 check, and mate next move on c7. If king f8, bishop g6 check. And now black is still up one piece, and if he tries to maintain that advantage with bishop to f6, well, he gets mated in two. Queen e7 takes advantage of the pin, and then queen f7 is mate. So black has to play king to g8, but now after check, and then taking this with check, and then bishop to h5 check, black loses the queen. So, and it's going to be a quick mate after that as well. Alright, so that shows why Van Wely could not take the bishop on g5 after Esserman's move. So instead he tried bishop to e7, giving back the piece and hoping for the best. But with white having so many attacking units right in the middle of the action and black's king stuck in the center, there's no hope. So after bishop to f7 check, of course, if king f8, I think once again bishop g6 check is strong. Doubtlessly d takes e7 is winning as well. So Van Wely went this way, de, knight e7, and this is basically a massacre now. I mean, white's attacking for free. He's down one pawn, not even a piece anymore. And after queen to d2, I mean, this is horrifying for black. White threatens to put a rook on e1, piling up on that knight on e7. Queen a5 check is also in the offing, followed by a rook check on the c-file, or bishop to f4. I mean, it's a disaster. So Van Wely played king to c8, which makes sense, freeing the knight from e7 to block a check on the c-file, which is what happened. Rook a to c1, knight c6, and now Esserman brings his last piece into the attack, threatening queen takes d7 check, and also perhaps threatening bishop to f4. And indeed, we'll see that's a recurring motif. All right, what can black do here? In the game, he tried queen f5. Let's see what happens if queen to c7, defending the d pawn in a different way. Well, bishop to f4 once again, queen check, king here, rook to d8, and now queen to d6 really creates a pretty pathetic situation for black, frankly, where he can hardly move anything. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if white could win this with Zugzwang if he set his mind to it, but there's no need for such fanciness. So, what can black do? He can't move the rook from d8 because queen takes d7 is mate. He can't move the other rook because queen to b8 is mate, wherever that rook goes. The knight can't move because it's illegal. The bishop can't move because it has no squares. The king has no squares. The queen can only go to a5 on account of the threat of queen to c7 mate. So this is pretty much a nightmare. On a5, well, again, I really think that white could probably go for the Zugzwang approach. Maybe play b3 here, and then on a4 play b4, and run black out of pawn moves. So that would be a very, very nice, entertaining, and sadistic way to finish the game. But he can also just be more direct. Bishop to e6 threatens bishop takes d7 check, which would be mate in 2. And it looks like the only thing that black can do about that is to create a flight square for the king with bishop to a6, but then rook takes c6 check, and this wins the queen and forces mate in probably about 3 moves. So, queen to c7 is not going to save black. So Van Wely played queen to f5 instead. Well, once again, bishop to f4, threatening queen to d6, and, sacrificing a piece, so it's always nice to do that too. Queen d6. Well, c8 didn't turn out so well, so now Van Wely's king moves back towards the center again, but now Esserman can take this, taking advantage of the pin, and after bishop c6, queen c6, he throws in the towel. Well, he's losing big material and or getting mated. I mean, I guess he could play queen no, he can't play queen f4, of course, because we give mate on d7. The threat's queen takes a8, If you play rook c8, then bishop to g5 check wins the queen, where mate's next move, king e8, queen c8. Rook a7 allows queen to b6 check if nothing else, or again, better yet, bishop to g5 check, right, and queen c8. So yeah, it's a completely hopeless position. King e7 doesn't help. You could play rook takes d7 against that. You could play bishop g5 check. It's over. So Van Wely resigned here. A very impressive win by Esserman, and it's a reminder that the Smith-Morra, even if it's objectively perhaps not best, well, I wouldn't say perhaps, I'm inclined to say that it isn't best, but it's extremely dangerous. I mean, even a very well-prepared player and a very strong player like Van Wely, who outrated his opponent by more than 200 points, was just demolished in this game. So it's it's definitely an opening that's worth taking very seriously. And for those of you who may face this, and you're not, you don't want to spend a lot of time preparing, I would definitely recommend playing knight f6 or d3. So both of these will get you out of the dangers of the Smith-Morra. So if you play 2 knight f6 against c3, you might as well play it here. You might as well play it in the Smith-Morra version. If you don't, if let's say you're a 2 d5 player against this, where you play one of the other sidelines like d6, then I would suggest perhaps playing d3. So this is a relatively simple sideline to learn. So just to give the main variation here. So c4, say d6, bishop takes d3, knight f6, knight c3, g6. Okay, white generally plays h3, as on knight to f3. Black can play bishop g4 and swap this guy, because black is going for a dark squared strategy. He's going to put the bishop on the long diagonal. The knight goes here. This guy may come here. So this knight on f3 helps to fight against this plan. So that's why it's a good idea to preserve it. So h3, bishop g7, knight f3, knight c6, castles, castles, bishop f4, and I believe now knight to d7 is kind of a standard way of handling this position. And as I said, it's solid. So I mean, white has a little more space, certainly isn't in bad shape, but it's entirely playable for black as well. So this at least avoids the most dangerous shoals of the Smith-Morra. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this game, and hopefully even the little blitz games that I threw in there as a bonus. And I hope too that this will inspire some of you to play the Smith-Morra and give you some good advice if you play the black side on how to deal with it as well. All right, thanks a lot. See you next week. Bye-bye.